Got a lot I'm going to share with you, and a lot we're going to get into over the next 2 hours on this special edition as we're stopping on this day, Monday, August the 19th, to pay homage and tribute to the great one, the late one, and our scholar, and one of our great ancestors, one of our great teachers, one of our greatest researchers, greatest orators. Of course, when it comes to health, when it comes to our wealth, when it came to our knowledge of self, when it came to conspiracy, not theorists, but conspiracy realists, and being able to connect the dots and reveal the plots, then this was the one that many of us, of course, couldn't wait to see and to hear, to get near, and just be able to bask in getting the information and the inspiration from this one that we're going to talk about tonight, Baba Dick Gregory, the Honorable Baba Dick Gregory, of course, Richard Claxton Gregory being his name. And today is 2 years. We're now 2 years removed from his untimely death, his announced death, and there's still many questions that remain 2 years later regarding what happened to our elder and our Baba, Dick Gregory, at the hospital in which he was hospitalized at Sibley Memorial Hospital, which sits right outside of Washington, D.C. and Bethesda, Maryland. And I think there's more questions that have not been answered today. And I got about 10 to 20 questions that I'll be asking. I might have to put it in a book or do a documentary. 10 to 20 unanswered questions regarding the death of Baba Dick Gregory, to the doctors at that hospital, to the nurses, to the hospital spokesperson, to, of course, the coroner, to those who did the autopsy, to those who housed the body there at that hospital for almost 2 to 3 weeks before it was picked up and taken, to a white funeral director, and of course the funeral company, the largest white funeral company in the country. I think it's called CSI or SCI. SCI, I believe is the name, Service Corporation International. And why his body stayed in that morgue, which we're going to talk about, for almost 3 weeks, why it was given over and the funeral given to a white funeral, knowing how conscious and how black Baba Dick Gregory was and is, and talked about how it was, of course, the black community that he came to and came through, and we pushed him downtown to, of course, those in Chicago where he started, and talked about Hugh Hefner and some of his institutions which he got his start. But he really talked about how he started in the black community and on the quote-unquote Chitlin circuit. So I say that to say, of course, why would his family give his body not to the black funeral homes and the black funeral and the mortuaries, but to give him to the whites, and then for him to be buried in Brentwood, which I believe the name of the facility is Fort Lincoln, which is in Brentwood, which is in Prince George's County. And his wife still resides in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where Baba Dick Gregory lived. That was his main home, was in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So we're going to talk about some of this tonight, because I think 2 years ago, there was it went through the community like a shock and awe. And many couldn't believe that a man who epitomized health, who didn't have a sudden heart attack or serious illness in any way, shape, or form, that in 1 week of time from going into that hospital on August the 12th, and many of us didn't know he was in the hospital. I'm going to talk about how I stumbled upon finding him in the hospital by that Universal Guard Force, and then I came upon him going in for my day job to do a delivery, bumped into one of his sons at the hospital, who had to admit to me that he was at the hospital, but then he told me that he was going to be discharged from the hospital, and he was never discharged. So he lied to me, and I'll talk about how some of even Baba Dick Gregory's so-called friends, some Carl Nelson and others, then ostracized Brother Muhammad to make sure that I could not get access to the airways at Radio 1. And I have my daughters with me tonight, and they could bear witness that many times when Baba Dick Gregory would call me, they were in the car with me. And many times Carl Nelson would call me and want me to be on his show, because he had Baba Dick Gregory coming on. And you know, Baba Dick Gregory, if he comes on sometimes, if he going to tell a story, he can go around to tell the story to come back to the story. But Carl wanted me to have him on to kind of guide the conversation, to keep him on point, because it was, of course, just a 3-hour radio show that Carl would have on from 4 to 7. So again, just got some little witnesses, as they say, out of the mouths of babes or out of the mouths of children. But again, this is our day that we're going to stop to honor him and pay, of course, homage. So we're going to start with, I think, some clips that we have of Baba Dick Gregory. And, of course, many of you know, if you would come to Terra Cafe, that he would always come over to Terra Cafe to see your little brother and share information with me, and I would share information with him. And some of you would come in Terra Cafe on a Saturday afternoon after the radio show, and you come over and you see us. We'd have our own corner table. We put 2 or 3 tables together, and we would invite brothers and sisters that just wanted to come sit down with us. So we'd pause our conversation. Those that came in didn't believe it was Baba Dick Gregory that wanted to take pictures and take photos with him. And, of course, he loved Terra Cafe. And then there were times that he didn't want to come to Terra Cafe, and he would call me, and we would meet downtown somewhere. We met at some restaurants downtown. A couple of times we met over at the Four Seasons restaurant with Jill Carter, who was there with us at that time. Little Melvin Williams was with us at another time that we met. The great Little Melvin Williams, the late Little Melvin Williams, we met over at a restaurant in Little Italy called Della Note's. It's no longer there, but I would always say that was probably one of the greatest days of my life, having dinner with Baba Dick Gregory, with Little Melvin Williams, and at that time with Delegate Jill Carter, in terms of the conversation and the information that was being shared. Of course, we're going to share some clips, and then we're going to talk about, of course, 2 years ago, looking back 2 years ago, because, of course, when we're grieving, and I was grieving because it was a shock to me, as I know many of you were, asking questions that still have not been answered publicly, and there's been those who have tried to basically avoid Brother Muhammad and tried to ostracize me in terms of coming on any airwaves. But, of course, I thank God that we have these airwaves now, because I would have loved to have been able to do this show 2 years ago, to be able to stop and ask some questions of those that was in his inner circle, those who claimed to be his friends, even some of the family members. And then, of course, when we lose someone of this caliber, of course, we always got to ask Key Bono, who benefits, right? That's what any good criminologist would ask. Any good Scientologist, not Scientology, but a scientist comes to the scene of the crime, who benefits? Physically, mentally, if there is a financial benefit, was there a political benefit, a social benefit to this? Was somebody's career bumped up after his untimely death, right? And then were there those who would rush to the scene and say that they were the heir to Baba Dick Gregory, that he, anointed them or appointed them to be the heir. You would always get that when one of our great ones have an untimely death, when we just study history and see that's happened. So you're tuned to the State of the City. Special edition tonight on Radio on Fire. So I got to thank Brother Diamond Williams, the owner of Radio on Fire, for allowing us to do this special edition tonight. I met this brother, of course, through his father and through his mother, who were always avid listeners to the State of the City, and always talked about how they would listen attentively when I would have Baba Dick Gregory on the State of the City radio show. And, of course, many of you would record the show, and you called me to my brother Muhammad, I recorded it. So if you miss it, I got it for you. And I would say, hold that cassette. I don't need it right now. I got some CDs. We good. So, but I got to thank Brother Diamond Williams for giving us the opportunity to come on tonight. So make sure you support Radio on Fire. Their Cash App is Radio on Fire. And, of course, the phone number when we open up the lines is 404-436-1277. So that's 404-436-1277. When we open up the lines, for those that might have questions, those that might have some comments, or those that just might have a testimony as well. I'm not going to have a testimony where, you have some that they romanticize the situation and they'll be asking questions. Well, where were you when the news was broadcast that Baba Dick Gregory died? I'm not getting into that. Some of y'all go on a binge on that, but I'm not talking about that. So, but we're going to talk about some things, I think, as I said before, looking back 2 years ago, his death, and of course, looking at and answering some questions as well as what happened at the hospital. How come we haven't heard from one doctor, one hospital spokesperson, similar to what we saw with other deaths? And we need a real people's investigation, as I said then, even today, in terms of going into that hospital, talking to the doctor, male or female, talking to the hospital spokesperson. I'll tell you later what the hospital spokesperson told me, right? Where was the news media? Because this wasn't just an ordinary black man, right? This was, of course, world-renowned Dick Gregory. So where was the media to go in and interview Where was the family that hosted a press conference with the doctors so that there were those that would say, well, there was nothing, everything was straightforward. There was nothing on the down low regarding what happened to him. There was no conspiracy. So you would thought the family would have said, let's, in order to convey, right, so that you won't have those to say that something else happened, right? Then they would have had a press conference. Let's lay out all the facts and the acts. But the mere fact that it didn't happen, then it opens up and leaves the door open that there was more to it than what we were told, what we were shown and what's known and what was told and what was being sold to us. So we'll talk about some of that tonight on the State of the City. But I think we'll start with a couple of the clips. I had some clips from my numerous interviews on the State of the City radio show with Dick Gregory, in which he would come over and sit in the studio with me at WFBR. And, of course, video documentation of, I think, a couple of presentations we had done together at Terra Cafe as well. So I think we'll start with a couple of clips that we have that we'll share with you, and then we're going to come back and go a little deeper in the show. So we're stopping tonight to honor and, of course, to commemorate the great one, the late living legend, Dick Gregory, who lives on, of course, not on this plane, but on another plane. So if we got some clips, we'll share some of those clips before we come back to the State of the City.
I'm so tired of you black folk walking around looking all evil like that's going to change something. Looking all mean, talking all crazy. Let them tell you about your children. If I sit here today, and these are all white folks, and they're putting some sleeping pill in my water, and I sit up here and doze off and go to sleep, and everybody told in the world, niggas is lazy. They tired. No, that's because you too naive enough to know what they putting in my water, okay? Your children ain't violent because they black. They ain't violent. Most people in the world live in a ghetto. They don't kill people. What are you putting in my malt liquor, white boy? Malt liquor is made by white companies, but only sold in black neighborhoods, and you ain't checked it to see what's in it. How much lead are you putting in my neighborhood? Lead affects my thinking capacity. Lead, there's only one thing on the planet more dangerous than lead, and that's manganese. Manganese will make you kill your mama. And let me tell y'all something. If you want to see the largest homicide rate in the world, it ain't in no black ghetto in America. It's a little town in Australia where them white folks' homicide rate is 200 times what their population is. And that town just happened to be located across the street from a manganese plant. That town is located across the street from a manganese plant. How much manganese are you spraying in my neighborhood at night while I'm asleep? How in the world can a 9-year-old child find a heroin man, but the FBI can't find it, and you gonna tell me that's a black thing? Y'all crazy? What is this about? And then black men, as you run off to war, kill folks, liberate folks, and then come home and a white cop or a white racist mentality then shot your mom in the back, and you got to call him. You don't call the United States government. You don't call that bad army. Black men, how can you let cops shoot your mama, your dad, and your daughter in the back and don't do nothing, but you notice they ain't never shot your car? They ain't never took a nightstick and knocked your headlines out. Black men, you should feel ashamed that you think more of your car than you do your mama, huh? These are the things that need to change. And when you see Hillary and y'all see Brother Barack, thank him for me. And you white folks need to be thankful. Because if y'all had a brother like me, y'all would really be in trouble. I'm so tired of you black folk walking around looking all evil.
And, of course, I think I had another one that I wanted to share. This was an interview I did with him, and he was talking about the death of Ron Brown. I think Donnie Glover snuck in the studio this day and actually had an opportunity to get some of the information. So listen to this, and we'll be back with more of the State of the City. That paperwork I gave you? That's what he's talking about right there. I'm going to share that on the air tonight, too. That's Operation Lantern Spike. We'll talk about that later in the show. But is he talking about King? That's what he's talking about. Make sure you get that. We'll show that. That's on the State of the City. We'll be showing it Ron Brown.
Yes, sir. That's Ron Brown and what was supposed to be a plane wreck. Former turn to the next Commerce Secretary. Yeah, the Commerce Secretary. You will see a head shot. That's a bullet wound in his head. Yes, sir. He was shot in the head, and they killed all them people and made it look like it's a plane wreck. Now, I'm saying that they couldn't deny when I released that because the folks that did the autopsy, right, at the Armed Forces Institute of Technology brought them to me. That's right. So I'm saying that all of this goes on in this country, and we think this is just some free, democratic society. Yes, sir. Let me tell you why I'm pressing that first. Yes. For this reason here. Something had happened in this country. We're here talking about Obama. That's right. But we don't know the level of hatred. Yes. The pure level of hatred. That's right. You know, especially African Americans. You know, we do a little weak stuff. Yes, sir. When it comes to violence. Right. You know, what they uncovered, thank God, yes, was a military takeover of this country. That's right. And that was like in May. Yes, sir. And what the plans was to kill Romney. See, we think to kill the president. No, they see, you cannot think, that's right, like the mind of them hardcore white supremacists. Not them Ku Klux Klan. That's right. You know, with thugs and hooligans. That Fox News. Yes, sir. This is how you look at anything else other than humor. Right. They don't control the people that listens to them. That's right. Give me a break, huh? Yes. And so what happened is they was planning. Hear this good now. Right. They was planning on killing Romney. Right. Huh? Not the president. Yes. Okay. A week before the election. Yes, sir. Okay. Yes. Taking him out. And it already been planned that Petraeus would be the one that the Republicans would pick to be president. Right. That's right. Then the military coup was going to take over. Yes. Obama's people found it out. See, you got a big battle going on between the defense intelligence. That's right. Military intelligence. Yes. Who is the war game. That's right. You see, they say we don't have to worry about president. They in passing. Right. They just there for 8 years at the most. We've been doing this for 40 years. Now let's go back and look at General Petraeus. That's right. How can a man that's been in the military, a killer, right? Let's don't play no games like you don't get to be general. Cold killer. You know? Yes, sir. And you upset because he got a whore? Right. That's right. You upset because he was a prostitute? Right. Then you keep saying, what are they covering up? Yes. Huh? That's right. And then you got these sisters, two sisters, and they keep playing this up and keep playing this up. Jill Kelly and her sister. What we were able to find out has been about, thank God that the president was able to find out and had personal people that he had made contact with that believe what he's doing.
We're going to bring that down. This was an interview that we done on November 24th, 2012. It's on YouTube, so you can pull it up and watch the rest of it in its entirety. But that was with Brother Muhammad and, of course, Baba Dick Gregory. That interview. So I wanted to share that before we share some other clips tonight. But we're stopping on this day, of course, 2 years ago, that the news broke at about this time, 7:30, 7:40. I remember I was at home and got a couple of text messages from some brothers. It said, Brother Muhammad, is this true, what we're hearing on social media, that Baba Dick Gregory has died? And I said, I didn't know. So what I did, and if time permits, I'll turn my screen around and I'll do what I probably hadn't done in 2 years and share with you my social media page in which I texted Carl Nelson and asked Carl. And Carl said, yeah, it was true. So, and I said to Carl, I said, well, there's more to it than obviously was being told. And Carl said that everything was being handled by Baba Dick Gregory's son, Christian, who was his manager. So I'm going to talk about his strange behavior before the death of Baba Dick Gregory, during the time of the death of Baba Dick Gregory, and since the death of Baba Dick Gregory. So it's not what some might call an indictment, but it's some enlightenment for me, and it was for others as well, in terms of the death of Baba Dick Gregory. But we got to look back at this because there's the atmosphere is almost similar to what it was 2 years ago, because at that time his death came right after this June 25th report that was done by CBS on Baba Dick Gregory. June 25th that year being, I believe, either the 7th or 8th year anniversary of the death of Michael Jackson. And when you go back and remember the case of Michael Jackson, how Dick Gregory played a very pivotal role in counseling Michael Jackson, telling Michael Jackson that he had been betrayed by even those in his inner circle, that he needed to leave the country and go up on the mountain and go away for years. And he took his advice, but he talked about, of course, that after Michael Jackson won that last case in 2004, and it's an interview that's in the final call that you can go and pull up. But it was Dick Gregory that said that the only thing left for those racist white supremacists in terms of those that wanted control over Michael Jackson's estate, wanted control over Michael Jackson in terms of that tour, right? Prior to that, but what happened in 2004 when they made up the whole child sexual abuse story. And I'll have to talk about that. Today's the 19th? I'm going to talk about that next week when we come up on the birthday of Michael Jackson, because I think a lot of that played into what we saw with the death of Dick Gregory when you look at the signs, the symbols, the numerology, and the gematria. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So the 25th was a significant date. So also the day before was the Carl Nelson Power Talk, which he does around the summer solstice. And the interesting part was that the two individuals, I think, that received awards, the one previous year, I believe, was Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Then she died, a very mysterious death. Then Dick Gregory gets it, I think, the next year, or in between, Claude Anderson got it. Or was it Dick Gregory and then Claude Anderson? I got to check with the brothers in D.C. But I know that Dick Gregory got it and then he got ill. I know Claude Anderson got it and then he became ill. So I don't even know if they had a power talk this year. But it was interesting that was going on. Also, it was right after he gets a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which was handled by attorney Ife Williams, who we later would find out was the treasurer over the Dick Gregory Foundation. All right, so we'll keep going on this. Also, it was right after the stage play, which was written, I don't know if it was John Bellamy, who was supposed to be one of his managers, but it was written by someone, relatives allegedly, but it was financed by John Legend, and it was a one-man stage play entitled Turn Me Loose. But when you go back and look at Turn Me Loose was in fact a book that was written about Medgar Evers. It's called The Ghost of Medgar Evers, Turn Me Loose. And the story goes that the night that Medgar Evers was shot on June the 12th, 1963, and he was the field marshal for the NAACP, that it was Medgar Evers didn't die actually in his driveway, but he actually died at the hospital. And his last words before he died was that he sat up in the bed and said, "Turn me loose," and then he died. So there's a book out, and if my brother can Google it, there's the book. It's called The Ghost of Medgar Evers, Turn Me Loose. But nevertheless, John Legend greenlighted a play, which they then said was about Dick Gregory, entitled Turn Me Loose. So clearly, whoever the author was of that book about Medgar Evers, and I believe the book was released in like 2011 or 2013. So they would have had to pay him, right, the rights to use the title of his book, whoever the author was of the book, in order to use it as a stage play. And they used in the stage play the father, or the gentleman that plays the father on the TV show. What was that TV show? Scandal? I think his name Joe Turner or Joe something, who played Dick Gregory. But it was a one-man stage play that went on to Broadway, right? And then after that, I think about 60 days after Baba Dick Gregory's death, they opened the play up on the West Coast in California. So you got to look at the backdrops, I think, to what was going on, because as I said before, there were some signs, some symbols, and some numerology. There was also the book that was supposed to have been due out. The book was not supposed to come out until November, but strange enough, this book Which I haven't even read one chapter of the book. Baba Nati, owner of Everyone's Place bookstore, actually gave me the book. This book, the defining moments in black history, and they scratch out black with the red and have history, reading between the lies, Dick Gregory. Now, again, this book was not supposed to have been out until November, but I'll share with you that right after the untimely death of Dick Gregory, and death, as he always said, is very personable to us as a people. So there was no place of where the family was receiving flowers, where you could send cards if you was in Washington D.C. This is just black culture. When somebody dies, you clean up the house, because you're expecting to receive guests now. But I didn't hear any of this from the family in Washington D.C. or in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So what I did see was that Christian Gregory was reporting everything on social media, right? So he said, in lieu of sending flowers and cards, that he wanted everybody to buy a book. Keep in mind, his father hadn't even had the funeral, hadn't even been buried. The body, in fact, was still at the hospital. And I have some brothers and sisters that may be out there listening that worked at Sibley Memorial Hospital, because we're eventually going to go to the scene of the crime, or we're going to go to ground zero in terms of what happened leading up to his death, from the day he was admitted on that Saturday the 12th to the following Saturday the 19th, in which his death was announced. So we'll talk about some of that. But nevertheless, those questions still haven't been answered. So there were signs, symbols, numerology, and gematria that I think we can't dismiss. And as I said before, asking, of course, in terms of looking at what happened and what's been publicly talked about, or why has it not been publicly talked about. So now as we go a little further, as I said, this is why we need a people's investigation. So tonight we're going to ask and raise some questions again to the family, to the business manager, to some of the circle of friends or friends in his inner circle, right? The Joe Madisons, the Keith Silvers, who would come over to Baltimore with him. Had my brother Reggie Turan, who I don't have his number. It's in one of my old phones, in which I can't get his number out of there. Reggie was one of the few that I would be able to talk to. There was a sister that would come over with him sometimes. I'll let her name remain anonymous because she shared with me of some things that happened to her a month before Dick Gregory died. And of course, then there was also, in terms of those who thought that if they talked to Brother Muhammad too much, that Christian Gregory was not going to allow them to come to the funeral. This is what they told me privately. And if I told you too much, I won't be able to be at the funeral. Now, I wasn't worrying about whether I could be at the funeral, whether I'm going to be sitting on the front row, side row, or any row. And I still got a lot of the text messages where they were initially saying that the funeral was going to be held at the Kennedy Center, because 20 years ago, you can go pull it up, 20 years ago, they had a big celebration of life for Dick Gregory at the Kennedy Center. So I thought it was interesting. Have a celebration of life and now a celebration of death, which they would have called a celebration of his life, back at the Kennedy Center. But for whatever reason, it was not held there. It was held at the People's Church, I think, down in Prince George's County, in Jericho something, I think it's called. That's where it was held. But again, when you look at who was handling the funeral, and I even had brothers and sisters that showed me pictures and sent me pictures, they were selling the books at the funeral. Now, I ain't never been at a funeral where they selling books. And these were white folk at the funeral. They were selling books. People were lined up at the funeral buying these books. And they had a line say one for cash and one for credit. Now, if you just at an ordinary funeral in the hood and somebody selling books or T-shirts, y'all would have a problem with that. I didn't see anybody go off at the funeral and say, what kind of madness is this? That y'all got to cease and desist trying to sell books. But they wouldn't have done it if they didn't have permission from the family or somebody within the family. Okay? To be selling books at a funeral. Okay? So, and many of you that went, y'all can bear witness to what I'm talking about. But let me keep going and go a little deeper. Because we got to ask the questions, as I said, what happened on that Saturday, if we just look at that day. But I'll share with you how just that part struck me as strange. I work for a company where I do deliveries. So on that Tuesday, if he was admitted to the hospital on the 12th, on that Tuesday, I was going down there. So let's see, Sunday would have been the 13th, Monday would have been the 14th, Tuesday was the 15th. I'm going in Sibley Memorial Hospital. Some of you never heard of Sibley Memorial Hospital till tonight. Sibley Memorial Hospital is a hospital that's owned by Johns Hopkins. Sits in Washington, D.C., but it's closer to Bethesda. All right? It's on 5500 Lower Road. If you come off of Western, I think you hit it off of Western Run. You can hit it off of Massachusetts Ave. But nevertheless, I do delivery. So I'm going in the building to do a delivery. And as I'm going in the building, Dick Gregory's oldest son, I believe, Christian Gregory's coming out of the building. So I look up. I'm looking down at my phone. I look up. I see him. I said, Christian? I said, yeah. I said, is Baba here? He said, yes. So I said, well, is he all right? He said, yeah. He said he just came back from physical therapy. He said he was just a little dehydrated, right? So I'm just giving you the story he gave me. He said he's a little dehydrated. He's just coming back from physical therapy. And he said he's going to be discharged tomorrow, which would have been Wednesday the 16th. So I said, okay. And if any of you know the relationship between Brother Muhammad and Baba Dick Gregory, anytime he was anywhere, if I was around, he would want me to be there. My daughters would be with me in the car, and Mama Lillian Gregory would call me, and she would say, Baba Dick is going to be with Paul Mooney, and they're going to be in Baltimore, and he said he wants you to be there. Or Keith Silver would call me and say, Baba Dick said he's going to be over at the comedy. They used to have a comedy factory downtown at Marketplace, and many of you saw me there at Marketplace, in which I came in with Baba Dick Gregory and Paul Mooney, and he asked me to stand up and told the people to listen to my show. In fact, Larry Young was there that night. He didn't say that about Larry Young's show. Larry dropped his head. He was so embarrassed in there that night. But I didn't stay for one show. I stayed for both the shows with Baba Dick Gregory and Paul Mooney. Then when they moved the Comedy Factory up off of Kane Street, where the hotel is, the Best Inn, I think that's where it is, where he would come there. Best Western, right there. He would call me, right? And if not me, it would be myself and Reggie Tehran that would be there. You know, for the 3 nights he would be there. He would be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So many of you would know that if any time he was anywhere, he would want me to be there. That's all I'm saying. If he was at a lecture and he came to Baltimore, and if I wasn't on the stage, he would say, come up, I want you to be here. I want you to be beside me, right? Because that's the kind of relationship we developed in terms of his love for me and my love for him. So now I asked Christian, I said, well, I'd like to go up to see him. He said, well, let me call, because he said my other brother, Johansson's upstairs. So he said, let me call up. So I didn't, crowd him, because I was there with my work uniform on. And clearly I was thinking they would have said, well, he overstayed his welcome, or he went, where he wasn't supposed to go, and he was only there for another purpose or reason, right? So I'm thinking, smart, that's all. So he gets on the phone, then he comes back over to me and said, well, Baba Dick didn't want me to come upstairs. So I knew that wasn't Baba Dick Gregory. So when I go back out to the car, after I finish my delivery, I call Carl Nelson. And Carl Nelson said, well, no, that's not Baba Dick. That's Christian, in terms of him wanting to handle everything. So I said, okay. And then Carl said to me the same thing that Christian Gregory said, that Baba was going to be discharged. So I said, okay. So I didn't think anything of it, okay? So Wednesday go by, Thursday go by, Friday goes by. I don't get a call from Dick Gregory. Normally, the relationship that we had, he would call me 2-3 times a day. If he didn't call me, Mama Lillian would call me. If he didn't call me, he would have this other sister that would travel with him. She would call me for him to obtain information or just to conversate, to let me know he's all right. If he went to the hospital and he went into dentist, he had a tooth infection or something like that, he would tell me about it and we'd talk about it, all right? So now Saturday night comes, and I think I went to Marcus Garvey Day on that day. Then my daughters were dealing with their cat who was sick. So I tried to stay close to home because of that, right? Now, some of y'all, I know y'all get far off. Y'all start talking about the total eclipse which coming that night. It was the first total eclipse that covered 7 states, and there was going to be this big rapture coming down, and, that's what Keith Silver said. He went on that spooky ride. I wasn't going on that spooky woogie ride with him, okay? So I'm home and get a text from a brother who said, tell me this not true, what he's seeing on social media. So they said that Baba Dick Gregory died. So I didn't go down to the hospital that night. Didn't go that Sunday because I'm grieving, but still my daughters, we had to take the cat to the vet about 5:30 in the morning, right? Because the cat is dying. So we had the vet. And that's a whole nother subject. I keep telling them we're gonna have to do a YouTube channel, Cat Lives Matters, because these cats that we've been having lately, I didn't even know a cat get a urinary tract infection. I've spent over the last 60 days, 90 days, probably about $3,000 on a cat. Okay, so I told them we got to do a YouTube channel, Cat Lives Matters, how to take care of your cat and why they doing what they're doing with these cats when they're younger, which leads them to have urinary tract infections as they get a little older. But that's another subject. All right. So the fact was I didn't go down. I think Brother Irritated Genie and the Straight Black Pride was having their event in Washington or in Capitol Heights, right? So I was grieving, so I said, well, let me get up. And I got up and went down to that. And I got to always thank Brother Genie because he allowed me to, I think, disperse some energy there in a positive way in terms of those brothers and sisters that was at the Straight Black Pride Convention, which was being held over at Everlasting Life Cafe, I believe, under Brother Baruch and Brother Irritated Genie. So I didn't go back down to that hospital till that Monday. But before I went down, I called the hospital spokesperson. His name is Mr. Gary Stevens. If you don't believe me, you can call and ask, if he's still there? Older white man. All right? So I asked him, I said, well, you had Dick Gregory in the hospital there. I said, has any news media contacted you to interview the doctor or the nurse, right? Or anyone who provided services to him while he was there? He said, no. He said, in fact, you're the first person to call me. He said, but due to the HIPAA law, which is, of course, about patient privacy, that he couldn't share a lot of information with me, right? Then I called the D.C., this is Monday. If he died Saturday, then I called D.C. morgue. They said they didn't have the body down in D.C., medical examiner. So I said, that's strange. So I went down to the hospital. I would get down there on that Monday or the next day on that Tuesday. I went up to the floor. He was in room 701. I talked to the unit clerk. I won't give her name. I said, well, did you see anything strange out of the norm, right? So by this time I gotta share this with you because the night that he died, the next day, and I'll ask my brother D Wins, see if you can pull up the LA Times, August the 20th, 2017, about Dick Gregory. You scroll down, I think it's about the 4th paragraph, and they said that Jesse Jackson had scooped the Gregory family and announcing Dick Gregory's death. The only problem is Jesse Jackson wasn't at the hospital. You understand? So how could Jesse Jackson, I think it said scoop or almost scoop, the Gregory family in announcing his death? Now, when his death is announced, they don't say what he died from, right? I talked to some brothers who worked at the hospital. They talked to some upper level management, some white folk, right, who said that listed on his death certificate was a urinary tract infection. Now, nobody dies from a urinary tract infection unless what you call infection sets in or sepsis sets in where your body gets poisoned, right? But nobody dies from a urinary tract infection. Let's be clear about that. So then the article in the LA Times said he died from heart failure, all right? Then his son Christian Gregory says that he died from years of fasting. Nobody dies from years of fasting, man. I mean, if that was true, nobody would be fasting. But this is what Dick Gregory's son, Christian Gregory, said, which was kind of very strange to say he died from fasting, right? So now Monday comes along, Carl Nelson has a radio show, and he invites, Kathy Hughes, Minister Farrakhan, Keith Silver, Tony Browder, all these big to-dos, supposedly, right? To come on and talk about Dick Gregory. So people were asking him, well, how come you haven't invited Brother Muhammad on? He clearly had a angle, right, that he wanted to slant to make sure that Brother Muhammad wasn't coming on because I wasn't going along with what they were saying. So I said to him and sent him a text message saying, even though I'm grieving, I'm asking some serious questions here that I think have to be answered if everything's on the up and up. Now, let's go back to that Saturday. Talk to, I can't get his sister's name because I promised her because she told me that she was in a very strange accident a month before he died. And she sustained a concussion and was in the hospital. And she said right after that, all communications between her and him got cut off. That if y'all knew Dick Gregory, he was very independent. He would drive over to Baltimore. He didn't wait for somebody to bring him sometimes. In fact, sometimes he'd be over at the casino and he called me and he'd be like, what you doing? And one night I had to go pick him up. I was going to a party with Delegate Jill Carter to a birthday party to a friend of hers. And the party was in Columbia down at, the Melting Pot, right? In Columbia. And I had to go get Dick Gregory. And because he didn't know where he wasn't using no GPS, right? he made me late to the party, so I said, well, now you got to go to the party with me. He ended up going to the party with me at the Melting Pot in Columbia till about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock that night. It was a funny story. Then we driving away, and I forgot to turn the lights on. Howard County police officer was getting ready to try to pull us over. I rolled the window down. I said, I'm driving with Delegate Carter, and we escorting Dick Gregory to the highway. But we apologized we didn't cut the lights on. I said, Nancy, can you leave us alone and let us go about our business? He said, oh, Dick Gregory, have a nice night, sir. You know what I mean? So, we wasn't like flexing, as my daughters would say. We flexing on him, Dad. We wasn't flexing, all right? So, nevertheless, that was the kind of person he was, right? So, that night, as the sister was explaining to me, that whole day was kind of strange because just like last Saturday, that she said to me, she said she had been kind of cut off from him. They took away his car keys so he couldn't drive. He was very independent, right? He had a car. They took his car away, right? So that's your way of you cutting him off from outside sources for whatever reason, right? Nobody has ever explained that. So now she tells me that she finally came to the hospital that morning at 7 o'clock and she saw some of the family there at the hospital. So she said she went upstairs. And just like this past Saturday on TV, there was the Unite the Right march that was going on. I think it was going on in Boston at the time, right? Or Charlotte, either way, and it was going on. So she said when she went in, there were other people in the room, and he didn't want to talk for whatever reason because other people were in the room. She said she tried to reach out and grab his hand. He didn't want to hold her hand because she could go off of feeling, right? That's what she shared with me. So she said he was pointing to her, to his temple, telling her to think, right? So something was going on, some dynamics that she couldn't figure out that was going on. So then, think about it, if he was that gravely ill, his wife of 54 or 58 years, Mama Lillian Gregory, who I always talk to, because you can't get an interview with him, as he always would say, call Mama Lil. So anytime any of us want to interview him, myself, Brother Ron Hurd out of Memphis, the brothers in New York, anytime they wanted to interview him, you had to call Mama Lillian, set up the time, and she would check with him because she handled his schedule, right? So if he was that gravely ill, when he went in on the 12th, right, then his wife would have been there that Saturday. She came in, as I was told, that Saturday he supposedly died at 4 o'clock that afternoon. So there were pictures that were sent to me, and I wouldn't post them because I said to the person I wouldn't post them because I guess they didn't want to. They felt like they wasn't protected and said, Brother Muhammad, you protected, but I'm not protected. But there were pictures of him in the courtyard down at Sibley Memorial Hospital. When you first come in, there's like a little turnabout. Then there's a courtyard over to the right, and you can go over there. There's like a little clock there. There's like a little courtyard or garden area. So there's pictures of him sitting up in a wheelchair at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He's not on no oxygen. You don't see him looking weak. He had that little red hat on that he was wearing, right? So what happened between 4 o'clock to 7:30 when his death was announced? What turn for the worse did he take that no one has explained to this day in terms of what happened at that hospital? He's sitting in the chair, in the wheelchair, on his own. He's breathing, basking in the sun. In fact, I think I heard I heard part of the interview with Minister Farrakhan talking about that, saying that Dick Gregory went outside, was sitting up, etc. So you say, let's say he had some incurable disease. What happened between 4 o'clock to 7:30 that his death was announced, right? That has yet to be explained. So you got to find that strange that you didn't see no interviews with the doctor, no press conference with the family and the doctors to say what happened down here at Sibley Memorial Hospital. Now, I eventually called Keith Silver, who worked for D.C. government, and Keith would come over with Baba Dick Gregory. So I asked Keith what happened, right? Because if he was hospitalized on the 12th, what was he hospitalized for? So this is what Keith Silver told me. He said, all I know is Baba Dick Gregory was packing on Friday night because they were going to do, and for those that's watching on my YouTube, looks like it's kind of stopped, so we'll come back up to it. But he said we were packing, and for whatever reason, let's see, let's resume it, pause. So he said we were packing, and Friday night, he said he was outstepping me going up the steps. And that's how Baba is. He said, damn, Keith, you got to keep up, right? So he said that next day, he was supposed to be flying to, I think it was San Antonio or San Jose. I want to say it was San Antonio for a show because he and Paul Mooney were touring together. So I said, well, what happened? He said he got a call at 9 o'clock saying that the flight was delayed, right? So he said, okay. And then he said he got a call back about an hour later that said that Baba wasn't going, that they were taking him to the hospital. He never said why they were taking him to the hospital, okay? This is what he shared with me. So I said, who? Of course, clearly it was Christian Gregory who was handling everything. And Keith didn't want to say too much because Keith was afraid, as he told me, he was helping Christian handle funeral arrangements and things like that. And if he told me too much, then he would be disinvited to the funeral. This is the kind of stuff they were saying. So now, as we go a little further, I talked to some brothers who worked at the hospital. I went down to interview brothers that worked at the hospital. Some worked in the housekeeping department. The brothers said to me, and the unit clerk said to me, she said that his family handled everything, right? And they were very private about everything that was going on. So I said, okay. She said he left the floor and went to ICU. But she said that he was still breathing when he went to ICU, when he left the floor on that Saturday. So that was kind of strange because when I went down and interviewed the brothers that worked there, some brothers worked in housekeeping and brothers worked in some other capacities there, they shared with me that he was moved to the CCU, the critical care unit, on that Thursday, which would have been the 17th. But the strange part was that the brother said he went in to clean the room, and he went in to clean the room that he said Mr. Gregory was sitting up in a wheelchair, and he said his entire beard had been shaved and all he had was a mustache. He said even though he had the mustache, he still recognized him. And he said that Baba Dick Gregory said, oh, you know who I am. And he said, absolutely. So again, there was things that were strange because at the funeral, he had a full beard, right? And this brother said, I swear on my mother's grave that they shaved that beard off and there was no beard on his face, right? Now, he dies on the 19th, but for some reason, the family never picked his body up from the morgue until almost September the 5th. I think the funeral was held on the 14th or something like that. So the body wasn't picked up until September the 5th. The body was in the morgue for like 3 weeks. So that's very strange right there. The brothers brought me down and took me into the morgue, but it was after they had taken the body. They just wanted me to see it, right? I took pictures of it and everything. At a later date, I might post it, put it in a book, all right? But again, there was just a lot of strange circumstances that have yet to be answered regarding what happened to him. Now his body is given over to I think it's called CSI or SCI, which is the largest white funeral home company in the country. And I think it was Carlton Douglas of Carlton Douglas Funeral Home here in Baltimore who said to me that the black funeral homes and morticians were calling around saying that it would be an honor to, of course, have the body of Baba Dick Gregory to be able to prep him for his last rites and transitions. And they were shocked and appalled to find out that his family did not give his body, right, to a black funeral home, but in fact, it was the largest white funeral home company in the country. So then, as I said before, that the family, rather than say, in lieu of sending cards or flowers, right, everything was being reported on social media, man. It was being posted on Dick Gregory's Facebook page, which is not handled by Dick Gregory, but was handled by his son, Christian Gregory. So therefore, there was no real public information forthcoming. Only thing they were saying was to purchase this book right here. That was it. Buy the book. And they were selling the book at the funeral, which, again, one of the brothers who went down, my man, Brother Glidell, sent me pictures of it. Said, Brother Muhammad, you're not going to believe this. I said, try me. After what I've seen over the past 30 days, try me. So his body is buried, at least that's what they've told us, right, at Brentwood, Prince George's County, at Fort Lincoln, which is owned by this same company, CSI or SCI, I think is the name of it. So there's been no interviews. Carl Nelson won't raise this information. His Baba Dick Gregory's good friend Joe Madison won't ask no questions. And of course, Brother Muhammad, who we have been talking about prior to his death, having him enshrined in a wax figure at the Great Blacks in Wax. His family hasn't contacted me. I reached out to Mama Lil one time, but she said she wasn't ready to sit down and talk for whatever reason. She's back in Plymouth, Massachusetts. But his daughter won't call me. His son won't call me. None of his sons will call me. So there's more than what they've been telling that took place at that hospital, as I said before. And I'm trying to see if my brother has the article talking about Jesse Jackson scooping the family and announcing Dick Gregory's death. Also, of course, his death comes as we look at right before the release of the J.F. Kennedy files, which were supposed to have been released, I think it was October of that year. They were released. Trump signed the release. The CIA and the deep state didn't want those files released, but they're now housed at the University of Maryland in not College Park, but right outside of College Park in it's not Tacoma Park. It's another little small area, but it's the archives where those files are. But it was a 25-year law that was signed, and the Bushes were trying to keep it suppressed from being released, but those files were finally released. And in fact, there's an interview with Dick Gregory talking about that, because he said he would be there and I think be able to give guidance and information to those of us that wasn't around when JFK was assassinated, those who lived through what I've commonly referred to as the age of not Aquarius, but the age of assassination. Then his death came, of course, a year before the historic 1968 March on Washington, but also a year before, or 9 months before, April 4th, 1968, April 4th, 2018, in which we were planning to go back to Memphis, Tennessee, the scene of the crime and the assassination of Dr. King, in which, of course, in this book by William Peppers, The Plot to Kill King, which you definitely want to get and have in your possession. Also, as you heard Dick Gregory talking about on that interview, which he was talking about the United States military that was there. Here's the file which he shared with me. Now, don't you think that's interesting that Baba Dick Gregory's been deceased or dead for 2 years, and the family hasn't said where are all his archives, where's all his reports, where's all his research that the public could come and read and have access to? I mean, don't you think that's interesting? But this was one of the files he gave me, talking about Operation Lantern Spike. Again, this was the United States military, U.S. Army Intelligence Command out of Fort Holabird, Maryland. So again, these were the military personnel that was sent into Memphis, Tennessee on March the 28th. Make sure we put it out there. All right. Sent into Memphis, Tennessee, March the 28th, a full week before King got there. Then after they assassinated King, they stayed until April the 12th to do mop-up. Because after they killed King, they had to kill so many other people that saw what happened. And then some, like Miss, what was her name? Grace Stevens, they put her in a mental institute. A lot of people, a white woman who wouldn't change her story about who she saw and what she saw. Okay? But again, it was Baba Dick Gregory that gave me this documentary. Again, Operation Lantern Spike. And they talked about March the 28th through April 12th. And you can Google Operation Lantern Spike, which was the operation that they used to assassinate Dr. King. And of course, William Pepper, who would later work with the King family, be their attorney and the attorney for James Earl Ray to get that decision that came out in Memphis on May or December the 8th, 1999, which you can go to the King Family Center and read that decision that was rendered by the Memphis courtroom, that it was in fact the conspiracy of the United States government, United States military, the Dixie Mafia in Memphis, Tennessee, and those who were agent provocateurs in Dr. King's inner circle who worked to snuff out the life of Dr. King, and he was assassinated or shot on the balcony. He did live, he did survive, only to be suffocated in the hospital, St. Joseph, which was the Jesuit hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. It's no longer there. It's been torn down, but it was the doctor, I think his name was Breen Bland, who was the one that put the pillow over Dr. King and told the nurse to stop working on that nigger and hawk spit on Dr. King and then suffocated Dr. King. All this came out, right, in that 1999 case, and all that is in this book, of course, by attorney William Pepper. And I interviewed attorney William Pepper last year on the State of the City because our plan was to do the interview with Dick Gregory, talking about the assassination of Dr. King 50 years later. And the reason why that's so important, because many who are on the planet today were not alive when King was living. So they don't know about Dr. King. They don't know what happened to Dr. King. They see and hear the I Have a Dream speech, but they don't know that King was assassinated because, as Dick Gregory shared with me, he became the first black man, right, to determine public policy inside of America when it came to the Vietnam War, when it came to the Poor People Campaign, which he was bringing to Washington, D.C., when it came to talking about an economic redistribution of the wealth and resources in this country, and of course, talking about young people taking a stand against war, and then ultimately, as he was moving closer to Malcolm X and closer to the nationalistic perspective in terms of how you could take this country before the United Nations or an international body and charge them with crimes against us as a people. So King had to be, of course, removed. And, of course, that was at the hands of the United States military, the Army at that time, headed up by Cyrus Vance. So that's one of the names sometimes is not talked about and mentioned, is the death of, or the at the hidden hand of Cyrus Vance, of course, the United States military, and the death of Dr. King. So again, you tune to the State of the City, having our special edition tonight, talking about Baba Dick Gregory, his life, his legacy, but particularly the death of him. And as I said, the unanswered questions, such as what was the cause of death? Why was he hospitalized? How long was he there? In terms of looking at August the 12th to the 19th. Who was his doctor, male or female, as I was told, right? And of course, what has been disclosed as well, and the day of his death, his condition, and if his condition was that severe, why was his wife not there? In terms of Mama Lillian coming in at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then to hear Ife Williams say on Carl Nelson's show that she was the last person in the room with Dick Gregory. Now think about that. He has a wife of 54 to 58 years. She's not going to let another woman be the last woman in the room, right? With her dying husband, right? So you know that this story had to be kind of fabricated. She was putting some, Ife Williams was surely putting some mustard on that story right there, sweetening it up for the most part. And she said that Baba Dick Gregory's last words to her was, stay woke. Now, long as I've ever been around him, you know what he always say, play now and play fast, because recess just about over, baby. You ain't never heard him say, play now and play fast and stay woke. That's what Ife Williams said, okay? And not Dick Gregory. You never heard him say that. And ironic enough, she has a radio show on PFW now entitled Stay Woke. Then I heard at the funeral, which I didn't go, I stayed home with my girls and we were watching it. But I heard Matsamela Mafumo, whatever, I think he called himself now, Mark Thompson, right? Said that he was on his way to the hospital to see Baba Dick Gregory, and that he was told by Ayanna Gregory that Dick Gregory said, turn me loose. Now, all the time I ever been around Dick Gregory, he never said no words like turn me loose. So there were just some contradictions in terms of all of their behaviors and what I've seen prior to his death, leading up to his death, and since his death. And I heard a brother who sometimes, as Baba Dick always say, listen to what people say in that first 24 to 48 hours. He said there's always a crack. You just got to look for the crack, okay? But I heard a brother who I met him through Dick Gregory, Dr. B Serious. And he said that he was getting some herbs together and getting ready to come see Dick Gregory. B Serious is on the West Coast. So he said he was getting ready to come, and somebody called him and told him don't come because Dick Gregory was going home. Now, he's gone home, and he thought that meant he went home from the hospital, right? But he said, of course, that he would later find out that meant he was dead. So obviously he didn't think the conditions was that bad that he was coming to see him with some herbs is all I'm saying. So you have to listen to what he said, but I think when I went back to listen to the brother, I don't think he really understood what he was saying and his naivety in terms of, again, his sincerity is what I'm saying, right? That he really thought that he was just coming to bring some herbs, not knowing that there was another plan at foot there at that hospital that was going on. And that may be the reason why we haven't heard from the doctor, hospital spokesperson, or anybody else. Similar to what we saw with Prince's death. We never saw a doctor, a nurse. We never saw the media. I mean, the local media in D.C. I never saw down at Sibley Memorial Hospital doing no interviews. Not to mention the national news media, but the local news media, right? And this was after Dick Gregory had just got his mural on the wall at Ben's Chili Bowl, along with what was the brother, that longtime TV personality that was over there? I think his name was something Vance. He ended up getting the mural. I don't think Marion Barry got one. I think they put Obama up there. I think one other person. They took Bill Cosby down for sure. That's for sure. They took Bill down. Y'all know what I'm talking about for those that's watching this in D.C. in terms of that mural. So all of that was kind of taking place at the same time as a backdrop to everything else that was going on. So we're going to go to a quick musical break in about 5 minutes, and I think we'll share that Dick Gregory's piece, Warriors Rise. Then we're going to come back, open up the lines. If you got a thought, question, comment, and some of my brothers I know that worked at Sibley Memorial could be out there watching. If you want to call in and comment, of course, you can call in and comment. But again, if there was, as he always shared with us, all I ask you to do, pray every day, 12 o'clock, and meditate that the truth comes out regarding what happened, man. If it was everything was on the up and up, we could have had these conversations with some of the family, with those in his inner circle, and they wouldn't have gotten up at the funeral and said, well, we've been hearing these stories and hearing this and hearing that, and my father died from years of fasting. Now, there was one other brother I talked to, an x-ray technician. I got his phone number. I've been holding it to call him because he took him to x-ray or MRI and said that they saw something. The other part I was interested in was a sister who was there, said that they wanted to discharge him, right? But none of the family wanted to take him home. I thought that was strange because he had his own place in D.C. He didn't want to go back home with Gregory. Christian didn't want him to go home, and Ayanna didn't want to take him home with her. So sister said she thought that was very strange, that they all was in the room. The doctor was talking about discharging him, but none of them wanted him to go home. So it was rather strange and telling when she shared that story with me. So that's the first time publicly that I've talked about that. Then I had a sister came to me and said that she had a vision, right, that he was being poisoned. Now, the last time I interviewed him, I think I had the last public interview was on the State of the City on 7/1/17. I got to go back and see if I can retrieve it. I may have erased it, but I do have it on the CD. That was the last interview that was done publicly. Then it was something else I wanted to add to you. It'll come back to me what I wanted to share with you regarding the last time I saw him publicly. We was at Carl Nelson's the Power Talk that he does in D.C. So Dick Gregory gets up to speak. He was walking with he had a cane. He said he was having hip pain, right? So he did mention that. Now, he gets up to speaks beautifully in terms of what he's talking about when he accepts his award. He spoke for about 30, 40 minutes, if not longer, right? So then he didn't know I was there. And so I walked up with him. I went with one of the sisters that accompanied me, with Sister O'Lori. She was there with me. She can bear witness. So I walked over to him at the end. We hugged and embraced. I sat next to him. But of course, there were people coming up that wanted to greet him, shake his hand, etc. So I try to always be respectful of that. So he said, man, I didn't know you was here. I would have, acknowledged you. I wasn't there for that. So he seemed like he was a little, after he spoke, something was happening with him, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. So his sister had called me and said that she thought that he was being poisoned, but she couldn't really say for sure, but she had a vision of that, right? But she didn't know how to handle it. And then the other sister said, well, he said it's above your, which he would always say, it's above your pay grade. You can't handle that. You got to go get Darren Muhammad so he would know what to do in terms of sharing this information with the public if he was in fact being poisoned, and by who for the most part. But the sister did share with me, she kept seeing a little green bottle that would be in front of him that he was sipping on over a period of time. So that could have been a possibility. I don't know. But all I'm saying, we pray, meditate, ask questions, because again, as I said, when I saw him, he spoke fine. When I spoke to Keith Silverman, he said he was fine. So the only question is what was happening to him, right? Either where he was staying or who was in his inner circle in terms of what was taking place. But again, there's just a lot of questions to this day still have not been answered regarding if he's from Plymouth, Massachusetts. And I got to share this story that it was a few years ago that he had a granddaughter who had overdosed on drugs and in Plymouth. And he had told me about her. And they had the funeral in Plymouth, Massachusetts. If you listen to a couple of my interviews, he talked about that. And you can Google that. I can't think of her name, but it's there. So I would have thought that he would have been buried and funeralized in Plymouth, Massachusetts, not in Washington, D.C., and definitely not buried in Fort Lincoln Cemetery, which is in Brentwood, Prince George's County, a little small town in Prince George's County, outside of, right outside of Prince George. I mean, it's in Prince George's County, but it's outside of, I guess you would say, Capitol Heights in terms of Brentwood. So let's go do this. We'll go to this quick musical break, come back in. We'll open up the lines. If you got a thought, question, comment at 404-436-1277. If you have something you want to add on Facebook or share your thoughts on Baba Dick Gregory, you can do so. But I thought tonight we stop, kind of go back. I didn't do this last year, so I wanted to do it this year because, again, for those of you that have listened to me on State of the City radio show, I've talked about this right after his death, that I wasn't accepting the facts and the acts as it was being reported. And were you able to find that article about Jesse Jackson?
No, not exactly. So we can talk about it on the break.
We'll talk about it on the break. Okay, so we'll go to this quick musical break. I'll see if I can pull that article up, and we'll be back with more of the State of the City.
What you young folks have been doing, that noise, that sound might be the last one. Don't let them stop this true revolution. You have the power. So money is not power. Information is power. The day you was born, all the wisdom and knowledge that ever was and ever will be, you was born with.
This is a freedom song meant to go around the world. Critical time everywhere in the world. Wake up, cause we stand at war. Please ask yourself, what are you living for? So you say you're a no-limit soldier, but you're living off the lies that they told you about what and who you are. You ain't never been a thug, you was born a star. With all the ice and the platinum chains, I guess slavery has a new name. Willie Lynch gets to win again. Every time we hurt each other for material ends. Baby girl, your body not for sure. The money he give can't feed your soul. Don't you know you hold the world in your hands? So change the game, respect yourself, the world will fall.
You're not a thug.
See the fire rise.
You are special. You are somebody. No more lies. Did you hear me?
Today we really living in some troublesome times. The truth has been hidden, there's a war in our minds. The values they gave we have internalized. Oppression so deep we are desensitized. As we stand in the final hour, you can't afford to give away your power. Don't sleep off the lies they tell. They think you're gonna fall but they don't know you well. Earth is gonna tremble, you just stand your ground. Warriors have faith in where your strength is found. Yes, I realize the battle is hard. We gon' go to war with the armor of God. Let your fire burn down all hypocrisy and rebirth the world ready to be free. Dream a life beyond what you see and finally become what you were meant to be.
You have the power.
See the fire rise.
Hello. Did you hear me? No more lies. Did you hear me?
Imagine life so beautiful, free of hate and war. Imagine you transformed your world because you wanted more. This day will come and you'll know that it's your time to fly. So stand today and burn the chains. There's freedom in your eyes. 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 Glory's rise.
No more lies. You got to have a coolness. You got to have a wisdom unparalleled in the history of young folks.
Glory's rise.
No more lies. Young folks, hear me. It's a violation of God to let a system reduce you below the dignity that God put in you. No more lies. They can't stop the revolution. They can't stop the revolution. They can't stop the revolution. That's an extension of evolution that God creates. The revolution. You have the power. What do I mean? Pick up a gun and stick? No. We're talking about love. We're talking about true revolution coming out of God's evolution. It's about love. It's about being lovable. The best way to enjoy freedom is to see to it that everyone around the world is set free. You can make a difference. I say to you, have fun and have fun quick, because recess is just about over.
back. Coming back in, State of the City. That was, of course, Robert Dick Gregory, his daughter, Ayanna Gregory, Warrior Rise. But again, here was the headline, August 19th, Los Angeles Times by Dennis McClellan. Was it McClellan? Yeah, McClellan. Says, Dick Gregory, who became the first black stand-up comic to break the color barrier in major nightclubs in the early 1960s, a decade in which he satirized segregation and race relations in his act and launched his lifetime commitment to civil rights and other social justice issues, died Saturday. He was 84. His death was confirmed on his official social media accounts by his family. Now, I'll say again, he didn't handle social media. His son, Christian, handled that. Okay? Now, let's keep going. It is with enormous sadness that the Gregory family confirms that their father, comedic legend and civil rights activist Mr. Dick Gregory, departed this earth tonight in Washington, D.C., his son, Christian Gregory, wrote. Even before the confirmation from the family, Reverend Jesse Jackson, a longtime friend of Gregory's, had memorialized him in a tweet. Now, as I keep saying, the only problem is Jesse Jackson wasn't at the hospital, okay? And you know the history of Jesse Jackson. If you don't, pull up that YouTube clip of Steve Coakley, our late great scholar Steve Coakley, talking about Jesse Jackson and the hand that Jackson and Billy Kyles and Ralph Abernathy played in the assassination of Dr. King, and how King was about to, of course, out Jesse for being an agent. Jesse then calls and put the call into the FBI and the Dixie Mafia that the match was hot, and now was the time to strike King. It was Jesse who was down in the balcony in the balcony, but in the courtyard that King was arguing with about why Jesse Jackson didn't have a tie on because they were going to dinner. But Jesse knew that according to the orders, right, from the FBI, from the CIA, from the United States military, and from the Dixie Mafia, that anybody had a tie on was fair game to be assassinated. So Jesse wanted to make sure that he did not have a tie on, okay? That was Jesse's critical role. Yet the next day, he showed up on TV. They shut Memphis, Tennessee down, and Jesse got out on the last plane before 12 midnight. The next day, Jesse's on to Today's Show declaring that he's now the heir to Dr. King. So you got to watch and see who was trying to pop up, as I saw one brother call himself Haki Wannabe me claiming he was the heir to Dick Gregory. You know what I mean? That's what he was claiming on Carl Nelson's show. And then Carl, I heard him try to say Brother Muhammad was one of them black activists that was taking money from the Russians, right? Wouldn't allow me to come on and defend myself now from these attacks, but to say that I was taking information from the Russians because I was exposing Black Lives Matter as nothing but a Soros counter intelligence controlled opposition group and nothing but an LGBTQ group, which it later came out that that's all they were in terms of the bottom line. But yet, you know, that was so that people wouldn't listen to Brother Muhammad. But I debate Carl Nelson and any of them, any time, place, and space they want to debate this information. You bring your facts, I'm going to bring mine. All I'm doing tonight is just touching the surface. I got much more. But as I said before, if there's nothing to it, just lay the facts out. Let us interview the doctor. Let us interview the nurses. Let us see the autopsy. Let us see the death certificate. Let us see the information if there was nothing to it. But if there's more to it, then you're not going to do it. What you're going to do is you're going to do what most do, say kill the messenger. Since I'm the messenger today, then you want to kill the messenger that's bringing the message, because everybody else is just accepting the story, hook, line, and sinker, and not stopping and say, whoa, as Baba Dick Gregory would say, let's slow it down and let's ask some questions here. That's all we're doing tonight, as I did 2 years ago, as I did last year. Let's slow it down and ask some questions out of love, not out of any hate, not out of any ulterior motive. But don't you want the truth to come out? Or do you really want the truth to come out? That's the question right there. So we'll put a pause in it, open up the lines. If you got a thought, question, comment, 404-436-1277. If you might disagree with what I'm saying, I'll accept your disagreeing as well. But of course, don't bring your emotions. Let's just come with some facts, okay? Don't just say your facts is because you sat next to one of the children at the funeral. That don't bring fact. You know what I mean? Or you got one of the books because you bought a book at the funeral. Now you tell me if you've been in every funeral where they selling books, man, and y'all call in, please let me know. And I did call the bookstore. This book was not supposed to be out until November of that year, but for some reason they, after his untimely death, rushed this book to early release so that it was released on September the 5th, and then they were selling it at the funeral, which was around the 14th or the 15th of September. I thought that was very strange right there, okay? And really, to me, it was outright disrespectful. Now,
that could have been the publisher.
Yeah, the publisher? Yeah, but the publisher wouldn't do it without the family permission, right?
Correct.
Selling books at a funeral.
Correct.
That's all. Okay. Have you ever seen anybody selling books at a funeral?
Nope.
You ever seen anybody sell? Because that's a tradition in the black community. If somebody gets shot, they be selling T-shirts. They wear T-shirts, but they ain't selling T-shirts at the funeral, right? Okay.
There's nothing usually for sale.
Right. Nothing for sale. It's a celebration of the person's life for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Or give people the time to grieve that are coming to that, right?
Yeah,
that's all. But I've never seen something like that before. And usually when somebody died, they tell you we can send flowers, send cards, right? Where the family's going to be receiving guests, right?
Yep.
Right. We never saw any of that. So we just asking some questions. That's all. Now, I got more questions. I may have to put this in a documentary or put it in a book, and offer the book for free. Not for a fee, for free. That's all. And if we had the wherewithal and we love those who were trailblazers, then we'd have done the same thing for Steve Coakley, who died in the hospital mysteriously. For Dr. Khaled, who died in the hospital mysteriously, right? So when that happened to our great ones, we owe it to them to stop and ask questions. He would do it for one of us if it was one of us. If it had happened to me, I know he would be one of the first ones asking questions, what happened to Brother Muhammad? He would be the first one asking. So if he would do it for me, I owe it to him to do it for him as well. And so do you. With that, we'll open up the lines. If you got a thought, question, comment on Facebook. If you got a thought, phone number 404-436-1277. With that, we got any calls or responses?
What a blessing for you, Brother Muhammad, to have the opportunity to share Baba Dick Gregory with your beautiful daughters. This is how legacy building is done. Peace and blessings to you.
Thank you. Peace and blessings to you. Yeah, they heard our numerous conversations. Is that right, girls? Yes. Yeah, they heard the conversations, and you heard Carl Nelson when he would call me, right? I'm a black man. Can you come on? Because Baba Dick's coming on, right? And he wanted me to be on the radio show with him, right? Yeah, now I act like you got amnegronesia when it comes to your dad. So I mean, this out of the mouths of babes. They saw it, they heard it, I ain't got to cue them and tell them what to say. They would hear it, And he would say he wants you to come on, and I'd be dropping them off from school or something, right? And I would say, I got to get the girls in the house, and then I can call you back, and I can do the interview, right? So, and they met and talked to him many times, at the cafe. So, I just allowed them to see that, what I do privately, I do publicly as well. So with that, we'll come back to the next call or the next post on Facebook.
So they said that I guess they're trying to say he was hospitalized for bacterial infection and cause of death was heart failure.
Well, okay. A bacterial infection. So you say, where was the bacterial infection? In his heart? Or you say it was in the body and led to the heart? See, all this could be dispelled if we just heard from the doctor, right?
Yeah.
Right. Or the hospital spokesperson, right? But he said bacterial infection. But the death certificate, as I was told, said urinary tract infection, right? His son said it was years of fasting for those that watched the funeral, right? I don't know nobody dies from years of fasting. I know the running man be around here running in Baltimore. Somebody better tell him that, right? Right? Fasting. Yeah, fasting. He may be hastening his death if he keep running, huh? So none of that jobs for the most part. That's all. But that's another theory. Bacterial infection.
What would the family be trying to cover up?
Oh, that I don't know. Good question. That I don't know. Right? That's all. That's just a good question. What would they want to cover up? Right? So those are the questions to ask. And if everything's on the up and up, as I keep saying, we pray every day, 12 noon, meditate, the truth comes out. That's all. Next question or Facebook post.
Loving the show. Somebody else says, I can't believe it's been 2 years.
Already, 2 years. That's what I said. That's what you said? 2 years already? Yeah, my baby girls, they were what, 10? What were you, 11 at the time? Yeah. Oh. And you were what, 8?
I was 9.
9 at the time? Yeah. Yep, absolutely. 2 years already. So time is just moving quickly. And of course, there was the movie that came out earlier this year in which he was in, I believe, because I remember he told me about the filming of the movie, which was about Buddy Bolden. Buddy Bolden was a precursor to Neil Armstrong. He actually discovered Neil Armstrong. And Dick Gregory plays him as an older man in a mental institution. But they filmed the movie in North Carolina. The movie was produced by I think it was one of the Pritzker family members. They're the Pritzker family. They're the ones that own the Hyatt hotels. They're the ones that own the Hyatt Hotel out of Chicago. His sister Penny Pritzker used to be President Obama's Secretary of Commerce, I think. But that movie came out without a lot of promotion. It was only in the theater for probably like a week. I think it's on Netflix or something now. So I would encourage those that want to see it, to see it and see if Baba Dick Gregory is in fact still in the movie. But I remember he told me about it, and he did an extensive interview with the International GQ magazine in 2007. At that time, talking about his life and in his legacy in 2007. So thank you. Next question.
Do you know Dick Gregory's doctor's name?
Don't know the doctor's name. The public don't know the doctor's name. Now, none of that information has ever been made available to me. I was told that it could have been one of the little Indian women that were there. But, Baba Dick Gregory would always say about his doctor, when he said they asked him about, what his doctor said, and he said, my doctor been dead for 30 years. So he was his own doctor. that we know first and foremost. But as far as which doctor treated him, no, because we never, like I said, saw one interview with the doctor. You would think they would say, we've been honored to, provided service to that man, that great one, to wait on him, anything, right? But we haven't seen, like I said, one interview, nothing from the doctor or hospital spokesperson or the nurse or anybody there at the hospital, which I thought was, again, just kind of strange. That's all. Death is private, but for a person who was so public, it was almost as if none of it was available to us or given to us, so that we would be assured that everything was on the up and up. That's all. And if he was that gravely ill, like I said, why was Mama Lil brought in 3 to 4 hours before he supposedly died? If he was that gravely ill, she would have. If he was in on that last Saturday, the 12th, then she would have been down there the next day on the 13th for a wife of 50 plus years. That's all I'm saying. And who would allow another woman to say she was the last woman in the room with their husband if he's dying? That story didn't even jive at all when I heard it. Those were some serious contradictions when I heard that story. But next question. And that was Ife Williams who said that.
How can you sully the great name of Jesse Jackson?
Oh, yeah, you're right. How could I sully the great name of
That's
Jesse
why I was
Jackson?
smiling when I say this one.
They know the great name of Hitler's name was great. The question is, what was it great for, though, right? So same thing with Jesse Louis Jackson, a.k.a. Messy Jackson, a.k.a. the Ford Foundation agent, the CIA informant, and so many other low-down things that Jesse Jackson was. And everything, as Dick Gregory said, he said everything that I said, that he said about Jesse Jackson, he said the King family knew about Jesse Jackson. That's why you never saw Coretta Scott King want to be around Jesse Jackson. She know the role that Jesse played in the assassination of her husband, Dr. King. So, but all that's public information, and there's no statute of limitation on murder. So it's nothing. And I'll tell you another story Dick Gregory said to me that Jesse Jackson Jr. shared with him, and said that he wished Dick Gregory had been his father instead of his father, because he knows the dirt that his father, or the blood that his father has on his hands in terms of the assassination of Dr. King.
Well, most people know about his sexual exploits.
Yeah, it's womanizing.
Womanizing.
Yeah. But all this is public information at the King Center. If you go to the King Center, that trial, December the 8th, 1999. And if you go to YouTube, there's the YouTube clips of William Peppers. Is 10 clips, 1 through 10. And attorney William Peppers giving closing arguments. One of the expert witnesses who was one of the judges in the case was Judge Joe Brown, who eventually got a TV show out of that. Yeah. And Joe Brown knows the role Jesse Jackson played. He tried to minimize the role that Jesse Jackson played. But Dick Gregory, in a very popular lecture that he and Baba Steve Coakley did, they laid all that out. It was up at attorney Alton Maddox Center in New York, in which they laid, that's like a 4-hour presentation that they laid out, in which they shared information on those that was behind the murder of Dr. King. And as I said, Baba Dick Gregory's death came a year before what would have been the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. So I think we can't overlook or underestimate any of that, because we're dealing with 70% of the people that's on the planet today was not alive when King was living. Right. So they don't know all that happened to Dr. King, right? And the King Center, 3 million people visit that center. 1 million of them are the Japanese, of course, who go and visit due to what happened to them. And
they're talking about in Atlanta.
Yeah, in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Right. Now it's become corporatized. Kodak and a lot of others have taken it over.
It's different now.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
right. But still,
now.
that trial and the transcripts of the trial is online at the center that you can go and read.
Yes.
And the King family only sued for $100, and they donated the $100 to charity. You know what I mean? That's all they sued for. But all that came out in the case that lasted. I think it lasted 3 weeks or 6 weeks, and you can pull it up and view it, but also read the transcripts. But that was thanks to the work of Dick Gregory, William Peppers, and the King family. And I keep saying, as I shared with you before we came on the air, that's what the family of Malcolm X must do to finally get, I think, it all out regarding the hidden hands in the assassination of Malcolm X as well. So I think that will have to happen in terms of getting lawyers, and they could consult with attorney William Pepper in terms of how he was able to do it, to get all of that information flushed out so that we can indict those that must be indicted, and I think free those who lived during that time of that age of assassination, who still thinks that it was, the Mossam Elijah Muhammad or Minister Farrakhan and others that played a hand in that, not looking at not just the assassination of Malcolm, but the bombing of Muhammad Ali's house on that day, the killing of the brother that Malcolm lived with. He was an Indian descent, but he lived in Kenya. His name was DePinto. I can't think of his first name, Kamau or Damau DePinto. But the same time Malcolm was killed, or the same day, he was killed as well, because he was the one that Malcolm lived with during the time he was in Kenya, who had talked about how to take our plight and fight to the United Nations and charge this country with genocide. And Malcolm was going to different countries in Africa, garnering and gathering up that support. And so therefore he had to be assassinated because of that. He was poisoned in Egypt. The Nation of Islam wasn't in Egypt. He wasn't allowed to land in France because they was going to kill him in France. Nation of Islam wasn't in France. So, but those that would like to create that so that they can have that divide continue will continue that. But the way you do it is lay out the acts and the facts and do what the King family was willing to do with attorney William Peppers, filing that lawsuit against those who they say were the killers, as the King family filed not just against Jowers, but they went after the city of Memphis, then went after the United States government, so that all of it could come out in terms of the conspirators and the co-conspirators to free the generations then, the generations today, and future generations.
There clearly was a divide between the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X.
At that time, there was a divide that was created, and then as I read and learned, that he was trying, as Khalid Muhammad was trying to get back into the Nation of Islam. You know what I mean? And there were those that didn't want him to come.
Malcolm X?
Malcolm X. But there were those that didn't want him to come in, as Khalid was trying to come back into the Nation of Islam.
Yeah, because he wanted to sit down and not talk.
And there were those that didn't want that to take place. Those are the agent provocateurs.
And there are also some people that wanted to start some separate things.
Absolutely. Sure. So, but you can't never dismiss the hidden hand of the United States government and the counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO.
At that time, absolutely.
Yeah, that's still at work today, right? But at that time, absolutely.
But yeah, definitely. And they really went unchecked at that time.
Yes, sir. Yep. So next question or thought, comment? Anybody else? If you out there, you got a call, 404-436-1277 before we wrap up tonight.
Is there a black hospital in D.C.?
Absolutely.
And if so, why did the family not take him?
If they had a press conference, we could ask the family that exact same question. Howard University is right there. When Minister Farrakhan was ill and had prostate cancer, they took him to Howard. They didn't take him to the hospital in Chicago. They brought him all the way to Howard University to get that procedure done. Yeah. So you had 4 black hospitals in D.C. You got Providence, which is there, which they trying to shut that down. Right. Howard, which is there, which they trying to shut that down. What was the other one that was there? Not D.C. Nah, what am I thinking about? There's 2 more that's there. I think that's there. That's in D.C. There's another one. I can't think of the name of the other one there. But D.C., then you had the one that's down in southern. I mean, if you're going to go that far, what's that one down off of Surratt Road? I'm trying to think of the name of that one, off of Branch Avenue.
I can't think of that. But Howard, the one that Howard operates was the former Freeman's Hospital. Freeman's Hospital. Which was the first first black hospital.
Yep, in Providence. But it was automatic that you would have taken them to Howard University. That's, you know what I mean? Again, nobody said why did he why was he taking a Sibley Memorial Hospital? You know what I mean? That's all. That's a John Hopkins Institute, but why Sibley? But again, if we had an opportunity to question those, right, with sincerity, that's all, then they could say, you know, well, that's all right. Wherever we wanted to take them, we want to take them. But why Sibley? Was a family doctor there? I mean, why Sibley Hospital? Was there a specialty? Was there a condition that he had that only Sibley could treat? Right? If we go along
sure
with
that's not the
right,
case.
that's right. That's the question. So with that, we'll come to the lines 404-436-1277. Good evening, caller. You're on the State of the City on Radio on Fire.
Peace. What's up, brother Darren? How you doing, man?
I'm
Shout
good,
out
my
to the
brother. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, man. I was definitely a follower of Dick Gregory. I used to always catch him on WeAllBe with the brother Ron too. But definitely, man, shout out to the brother because I learned a lot, even with a lot of information put out there. I got two questions for you.
Yes.
I mean, it's not really pertaining to the Dick Gregory thing.
Right.
I wanted to know. I was seeing your video when you was talking about Colin Kaepernick and all of that shit sound 100. What do you think is the angle they're playing now? Because if Kaepernick was an agent, and we know that he really wasn't doing that for Black Power or for just Black people, what do you think the angle of that is? Like now with Jay-Z and all this other stuff that's going on, because they're throwing us a lot of curveballs.
Right. Well, I think one of the things, now you mentioned Brother Ron Hurd. Now it's interesting because when this happened with Baba Dick, Ron came up and went to the funeral, right? I haven't spoken to Ron as much, and I just thought that was interesting. Ron didn't bring me on to talk about what my thoughts were. And anytime Baba Dick was on Ron's show and other shows, he would always mention my name and share, right? In terms of the relationship. So it was just interesting. The one conversation I had with Ron, he said to me, if there was foul play, ain't nothing we can do about it. I mean, this is what he said to me. So I was kind of blown away that he would say that. But at the same time, I was blown away, but I wasn't because, again, as Baba said, once you put them magic glasses on, you can't take them off, right? But you can't make other people see what you see. So Ron may not see what I see, right?
He may see what you see, but maybe he might be a little shook.
Right, maybe. So other than that, I mean, I really haven't conversed with him and had no conversations with him, you know, in terms of that part. So I just want to thank you for that. As it relates to the Colin Kaepernick piece, again, you got to always remember, as I said before, his agent is Rahm Emanuel's brother, Ari Emanuel.
That's right.
So don't ever forget that. When you start pulling back the covers and see who the real agents that control Jay-Z and Beyonce and some of the other ones, you'll see Ari Emanuel back there as well. All right? IMG, WME, IMG. Now, as far as I keep saying with Kaepernick, another angle I think that I didn't talk about was the whole piece sometimes about the concussion issue. How all that attention to him kind of took the whole issue of concussion of current players and former players off the board. There was big money they were supposed to get, right? So that because Will Smith came out with the movie. And so it took a lot of
pounding that like 2 years ago. 2 years ago, that was an ongoing topic.
Right. And the fastest growing segment of concussions are not NFL players. When you do the research and Google it, they say it's young girls that play soccer for the most part, right?
Wow.
So with time that we should have been having some real discussions about that issue, then because all the attention was on Kaepernick and all of this being brought back up right now, no coincidence, because this is around the same date that Kaepernick sat down. It was in August, remember? Go back and pull up the exact date that it went down. So all this is coming, they do everything on time, signs, symbols, numerology again. And it was right before the kickoff to the NFL season so that they could use that, right, to bring about some righteous social engineering, not righteous social, but social engineering the whites around what? The flag, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the NFL. Now, of course, if it was a real issue, as I said, all they had to do was go back to what the NFL did prior to 2009. When Obama became president, his Department of Defense was giving money to the NFL to push false patriotism by saluting military personnel before the game, halftime of the game, and after the game, right? All that eventually came out, that the teams were taking money to push that. So if Kaepernick was serious, if his agents were serious, the NFL Players Association was serious, they would have said, let's just go back to what we was doing prior to 2009. The players didn't even come out on the field until after the national anthem. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So it was the game and the social engineering that was being played on the people. Now, as I keep saying, Kaepernick hasn't gotten one law changed, not one police officer prosecuted. Now, no flag has killed anybody. If he said he not standing for the flag because police officers killing black men, okay, I say, all right, if I believe that that's what you're standing for, right? There's been no law. He haven't gone to Washington to get no laws changed. When Trump became president, Trump said, give me a list of cases. You know, the only 3 NFL players that went to D.C. was Anquan Bolden, right? At that time, I think he was playing for either the Lions or he was getting ready to go to the Buffalo Bills. Malcolm Jenkins of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think the other brother name was Bamosi Johnson, who went from the Lions and signed with the Patriots at that time. But none of the other players even went to say, here's some things that we can do to stop the police extrajudicial killing of black men in these cities across America. Black men, black women, black youth. It didn't happen with Colin Kaepernick. What Colin Kaepernick did do, he didn't lose no money, as I said before. He still had his Nike contract, still had his Beats contract, still had his Jaguar contract, still had his McDonald's contract, and was still getting paid by the 49ers. Then he said he was going to write a book, and the press conference that he held in the offices to talk about who was going to distribute the book, the press conference was held at WME and IMG headquarters in New York, man. So he's like, who's zooming who? Now the crazy part is that when the NFL players were talking about this issue of concussion, and I think Jim Brown was one of the leaders, the first place they went to was also WME and IMG. I mean, you can Google the article. So I thought that was interesting because either way, Ari Emanuel was trying to get paid by negotiating all this for the former players. Then some of the current players and recent former players were talking about filing an additional lawsuit, and the NFL told them those that do that anybody that was working in television like Dan Marino, they fired them. They said y'all will not be privy to no lawsuit. They fired Dan Marino and some of the other ones, and some of the other ones said they took their name off of, like Deion Sanders and some of them. They took their name off of that quick, you know. True. But now as we move up to this whole thing with Jay-Z, and they say he's partnering with the NFL, right? But you got to look at and read the small print because they say the NFL has hired him as the strategist for entertainment, I think is the title that he had, right? The strategist for live entertainment. You say, well, who was the strategist before him? You know what I mean? So we don't get caught up in it.
Social injustice.
Right. No, I mean, who was the well, social injustice that's just the NFL's new campaign called Change Initiative is that they're doing.
Yeah,
they didn't need Jay-Z to do that because they had already partnered with like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, United Way. Yeah. They've already done that. You know, my daughter, she did a commercial. How long ago was that you did that commercial with Steve Smith? 2016. They did a commercial called, what was it called? Look Up. It was United Way campaign, right? Look up, put it away. Don't let technology get in the way of friendships, right? NFL.
I remember that.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that's NFL. Yeah, she was in the commercial. She was in about 60% of the commercial, right? Yeah. So, you know, but I'm saying you got to look at the details and ask if this really benefits us as a people and not getting caught up in the saying, well, you know, Jay-Z is saying you don't need to do no more kneeling. Now we got to come to the table because you still don't have no black owners, right? You got some Arab owners, the Pakistani, right?
But he can potentially be one of. He could probably be the first.
But you had other brothers that have come before him that offered to buy. You know, a black man wanted to buy the Minnesota Vikings, right?
Yeah, but they ain't want to let them in.
Exactly. So if you don't hear Jay-Z saying that, then what they're doing is.
But he uses leverage.
That's not leverage. If he's just at the table, he's not bringing nobody else to the table but him. So what they're doing is he's giving the NFL an out. This is a $9 billion industry we're talking about, right? That's not using no leverage right there. The leverage is, and then if you want to talk about programs is really effective, what Jim Brown has been doing with his program already, American, right? In terms of changing gang members' life, those are programs that's already taking place. Jay-Z don't have a program where it's taking place. Now, if he partnered with other people that already have real programs, then I could see that. But if this is to say,
he ain't smart enough to do that?
No, well, obviously he's not doing it. All them brothers in New York. Only one you bring into the, he just becoming just king of, you know, what's that, what they call it, strategic what? What was that title they called it? Entertainment, live entertainment.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but that's his way in.
The social justice, but his title was dealing with something with social justice.
Right.
I got one more question for you, Brother Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
Look, I'm doing a documentary, right? It's called Culture Freedom. It's called Hidden Forgotten Cultures of America Black Indians.
What's it called? Culture Freedom?
It's called Culture Freedom.
Culture Freedom.
Forgotten Cultures of American Black Indians.
Okay.
And what I do is I walk up to random Black Americans and I ask them what tribe of Indian they got. And it never fails. Every Black American that I run across always tell me they got an Indian. Now, I'm looking at this like, I'm talking about like in the 90%. Not in no 30%, in the high 90s. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody knows this. I mean, I'm quite sure you heard that in your family. Which tribe of Indians your grandma said that?
Sure. Yes, sir. Okay. Send me some information on that, and maybe we can get you on to talk more about it, all right?
No doubt, my brother. No doubt, man. Just peace. Keep doing what you're doing, my brother. Peace, man.
All right, brother. Peace to you now. Thanks for checking in. All right, let's see. We got another call, and keep me up to date on the time, brother. Okay? But see, we got another call or another comment on Facebook. You can get in on the conversation, 404-436-1277. Get in where you fit in where you get in. I know when I start talking about Colin Kaepernick, I touched some of y'all nerves, boy. Some of y'all fell for it. From Nisa Diab. See, she the first one coming out. Nisa Diab, right?
You probably should do a
whole show on that. Yeah, I'm about to do a whole show on that one.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Definitely.
Right. Yeah, I had to do a whole show on that.
While we're on the subject of mysterious deaths, will anybody ever find out what exactly happened to Dr. Amos Wilson?
Amos Wilson, yeah, we need a people's investigation.
Teacher,
I agree.
Who passed away mysteriously.
Yeah, I think when that happened, we have to have a people's investigation. And if it's nothing to it, let's just bring the facts and the acts back to the people and say, this is what we uncovered, this is what we discovered, right? And again, if it's death occurred at a hospital, wherever, we should be able to have access to, the medical personnel, the medical files. If the family wants transparency, right? Don't use the HIPAA law to keep us from getting access to the information. That's all. They will use that. So then that means it's something else. It's something else afoot if they don't want us to have that information. With that, we'll come back to the line, 404-436-1277. Good evening, caller. You are on the State of the City at Radio on Fire.
Brother Muhammad, Brother Thomas.
Hey, peace, Brother Thomas. How are you?
Blessings, my brother. Great show.
Thank you.
Hey, I got a question I want to ask about. His name's Christian Gregory.
Yes.
No, which son is he of this? Is he the oldest or the youngest?
He's the oldest, I believe. Yeah. He's the oldest.
He is the oldest.
He's the oldest. And I think he was Baba's business manager along with, I think, John Bellamy. So I was told that they were all in the hospital room that evening or that day as well.
And he handles the
social media. What was amazing to me, instead of them not having the service for Baba Gregory at the Kennedy Center, they had it at Jericho City of Praise.
Right, yeah, Jericho City of Praise, right. Mm-hmm. And of course, go ahead.
With Jericho City of Praise, Bishop Peoples is his name.
Right.
That's over there.
Yeah, they had a big fight over that, right? Him and his family, right?
They had a big fight over that church in which he lost that church to a pastor, Michael Friedman. Mike and D.D. Friedman. Right. Right. They're around here putting their names on everybody's churches, as some of these mortgage companies used to do by what they call it, put your name on a quiet title.
Yes, sir.
They're around here putting their names on quiet titles on a whole lot of folks' churches that nobody knew nothing about. And there was an attorney, Brother Muhammad, right here in Baltimore that helped this clown did that. That's why she got disbarred. Okay. Her name is Eureka Cole.
Cole?
Call herself Eureka Cole.
Okay.
Cole. Okay. Call herself the church attorney. That's why she got disbarred. Okay. And
yes, sir.
Freeman and some of them swinging deacons over there had to pay this man $150 million and return the church back to him.
Yes, sir. That sounds like a whole nother show too. We're gonna have to talk about, my brother. But before you wrap up, bring it on back around to Baba Dick Gregory. Now, you got any other questions about that?
His death, his untimely death.
Right.
At 4 p.m. I think I heard you said.
Well, they said they announced it at 7:30, but 4 p.m. he was sitting down in the patio in the little garden area that they have in front of the hospital.
Right, the little courtyard that that the patients normally come out get fresh air, or whatever the situation is. Mm-hmm. But then all of a sudden, at 7:30, he's pronounced dead.
Yes. So what happened in the 3 hours, bro? Nobody has accounted for. Nobody's accounted for the 7 days from the 12th to the 19th. Much less accounted for those 3 hours in terms of what happened. You know.
And now, I don't know how this happened. Somebody might know a lot better than me. Maybe Mr. Carlton Douglas can call in and answer something for me.
Yeah.
If I have a full beard, right, you shave my beard off, right?
Yep.
And I die.
Right.
Does the hair on my face still grows?
Don't go back in those 3 weeks if you go back in those 3 weeks if you dead, brother. So but again, like I said, the brother shared with me, man, they said brother said it was so quiet that they didn't even know he was in the hospital, right? But then the brothers that worked in housekeeping said we was cleaning the room and they had moved him from I think it was in 701 or 703. And they moved him from that unit over to CCU, which is the critical care unit, on that Thursday. And that's when the brother said he came in and he saw him sitting up in the chair. But at the funeral, he had a full beard. So again, nobody's like I ain't got anything out of anybody. Nobody wants to talk to Brother Muhammad. I've been ostracized about it, period.
I know,
conversation
Carl,
with me.
At one point, Carl Nelson, you used to give him a lot of props, because at one point we thought the brother was on the right side of things.
Yeah, thought he was on the right side.
Now we see he's been caught and they're getting ready to cold drop him real soon.
They may. Well, thank you, Brother Thomas. But he was one of the ones. He was one of the ones Baba Dick told me to watch. Now, it was a couple of more he told me to watch. I'm gonna hold some of their names for tonight, but it was a couple of them he told me to watch. And then right after he transitioned, they showed their true colors to me. Carl was one of them that he told me to watch.
Joe Madison, Larry Young, because I always hear Larry Young talk about how he and somebody riding Bobby Gregory through the city of Baltimore during the Freddie Gray uprising. Right. I'm like, he's lying his eyeball off. Excuse me.
Right. Okay.
He is lying his butt off.
I agree, bro. No, you can say that.
You said one more thing that got my attention.
Yes.
About the cats. About your daughter's cats.
Yes.
Is that why Larry doesn't love cats so much?
I don't know, but I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
All right, brother.
All right, peace. So we got about 5 minutes left. If you got a thought, question, comment on Facebook, you can comment. But again, we just were stopping tonight on the second anniversary of the death of Baba Dick Gregory to commemorate him, but also still asking questions. And I think, as I said, we'll do this in either a documentary or in a book form, still asking questions. We got to do that when we lose great ones to us as a people. And as we saw with Baba Dick, as we saw with Baba Steve Coakley, as we saw with, of course, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. I think we got to stop and ask those questions and look after other elders like Alton Maddox Jr., who's up in age, but of course we stand on their shoulders and ask about their conditions, those that might be in New York, looking after him, and others, elders that might be in our city. We saw what happened to Dr. Ben when he was in a senior citizen home and a white reporter snuck in and in the condition that Dr. Ben was in, trying to interview Dr. Ben and take the picture and put it on front page of the New York Times. I think I remember hearing one of the elders, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, say they was going to deal with that, but they never dealt with it at all. You know, I think I heard Browder say they was going to deal with it. They didn't deal with what happened to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And I went to her house the next day, and the only one was at her house was her sister, what was her name? Barbara, or the other one, not Barbara. It was the older one. She was there, and I met one young brother, Brother Glidell, and we went to the house, and I thought it would be many brothers and sisters there in the conscious community to protect her home and to see if she needed or wanted for anything or did not need or want for anything. I was shocked, man, that nobody was there. I was very shocked. Here was one of our elders in Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who died under similar circumstances, strange, and a lot of those questions still haven't been answered in terms of what happened to her. So we got to continue to ask those questions, but also honor them in terms of their legacy. So we're going to begin to wrap up the show. I want to thank, again, Brother D. Williams, Radio on Fire, for giving us the opportunity to do a special edition tonight. We won't be on Wednesday because we did a special edition tonight, so we'll be back next Wednesday, and we may do, I think, a segment or two talking about this whole Colin Kaepernick and Jay-Z in terms of what's being put out there, but then also not falling for the okie doke, because it could be just controlled opposition on both sides. But we'll bring the facts and the acts as we talk about that and much more on the State of the City. But we'll be back on State of the City on Saturday, 12 noon on WFBR. I want to thank my beautiful daughters who came tonight. Anything you want to say before we wrap up? No? Okay. All right. I want to thank them for coming. Princess Amina, Princess Asada sitting in with Dad tonight. And they'll be coming on the microphone and definitely coming on to share, of course, some of their talents with the family as well, because that's the next generation of the State of the City that continues. So I want to thank them. Thank, of course, Radio on Fire. Don't forget to support them. Their Cash App is Radio on Fire to support the State of the City. Of course, my Cash App is $SOTC Muhammad, all one word. Thank all of you for tuning in tonight. We'll be back here next Wednesday, 7 to 9 p.m. And again, this has been a special edition as we stop today, August 19, 2019, to commemorate the great one, the sage of all age, the living legend, the late living legend, Baba Dick Gregory. So until next Wednesday at 12 noon, God bless, or Wednesday, 7 to 9 p.m., Saturday, 12 noon. God bless. Let's continue to clean up all this mess. Stay watchful, stay vigilant. We up out of here. Peace. Thank you for tuning in, Facebook. We'll be back on next Wednesday, of course, 7 to 9 p.m. We will podcast the show on our Spreaker page, Facebook page rather, and on Twitter page. So thank all of you for tuning in. And of course, if you got a question, thought, comment, you can send it on Facebook, and I will try to